What if the most dangerous book ever written was not a bomb-making manual, not a revolutionary call to arms, and not even a secret government document? What if the most dangerous book in history was a short, cold, practical memo written by a desperate, tortured, unemployed man sitting in rural exile, hoping it would get him his old government job back? That book is The Prince, written by Niccolò Machiavelli in 1513. And for 5 centuries, it has terrified kings, disturbed popes, inspired dictators, confused scholars, and quietly shaped the way power actually works in the modern world. Napoleon read it obsessively and wrote notes all over his personal copy. Mussolini wrote a thesis celebrating it. Stalin reportedly applied its logic to destroy his own allies. The Catholic Church banned it. Elizabethan England turned Machiavelli's name into a synonym for the devil himself. And yet, modern scholars argue this same book might actually be a piece of brilliant satire, a warning to ordinary people about exactly how tyrants think. 500 years, zero consensus, maximum fear. Welcome to the book line. This is The Prince. And by the end of this video, you will never think about power the same way again. Part 1. The Man Behind the Fear. To truly understand why The Prince became the most feared political text in human history, you need to understand the man who wrote it, and more importantly, the broken, desperate situation he was in when he wrote it. Niccolò Machiavelli was not an evil philosopher sitting in a dark tower scheming about tyranny. He was a senior civil servant, a diplomat, a practical government operator who spent 14 years in the service of the Florentine Republic. He negotiated with kings, popes, and military commanders. He was sent on missions to France, to the Holy Roman Emperor, to Cesare Borgia. He was embedded in the actual machinery of Renaissance Italian politics at its most violent and unpredictable. He was not theorizing from a library. He was watching power from the inside. And then, in 1512, everything collapsed. The Medici family, the dominant political dynasty of Florence, returned to power. The republic Machiavelli had served for 14 years was dismantled. He immediately lost his position. Then it got worse. In 1513, he was accused of being part of a conspiracy against the Medici. He was arrested. He was tortured using a method called the strappado. His hands were tied behind his back. He was hoisted into the air by a rope and then dropped repeatedly until his shoulders dislocated. He confessed to nothing because he had nothing to confess. He was released, but only into exile. Stripped of power, stripped of income, stripped of relevance, he retreated to a small family farm outside Florence. And there, in that state of humiliation and desperation, he wrote The Prince. He described his daily routine in a famous letter to his friend Francesco Vettori. During the day, he did ordinary country things, checked traps, cut wood, argued with peasants. But in the evenings, he would take off his dirty clothes, put on court dress, and enter what he called the ancient courts of ancient men. He would read history. He would mentally enter the company of great rulers and generals. He would ask them questions. He would absorb their lessons. And then he would write. The Prince was that writing. And here is the hidden irony that changes everything about how you read this book. It was not written as a revolutionary document. It was not a philosophical manifesto. According to most historians, it was, at least in part, a job application. Machiavelli dedicated The Prince to Lorenzo de' Medici, a member of the very family whose return had destroyed his career and whose agents had tortured him. He was, in the most painful way possible, trying to prove his usefulness to the people who had broken him. He was saying, "Look at what I know about power. Look at how practical I am. I can serve you." The book that terrified the world for 500 years began as a desperate man's attempt to get his desk back. The Medici showed little interest. Machiavelli never returned to meaningful political service. He died in 1527, still outside power, still bitter, still underused. The Prince was published in 1532, 5 years after his death, and immediately began to spread like fire. Part 2. The Core Paradox. Why was it actually feared? Before we get into the specific ideas, let's understand the central reason this book was so explosively dangerous in its historical moment. Before The Prince, political writing in the Western tradition followed a clear tradition. Books for rulers, called mirrors for princes, were essentially moral instruction manuals. They told rulers to be just, merciful, faithful, generous, humble, and pious. They described what a good Christian ruler should be. They assumed that political success and moral virtue naturally went together. Machiavelli destroyed that assumption in the very first pages and never looked back. He was not interested in what rulers should be. He was ruthlessly, clinically interested in what rulers must do if they want to survive in a dangerous world. And he made the separation explicit. The man who insists on being good in all situations will come to ruin among those who are not good. That single shift was seismic. He separated politics from private morality. He separated governance from Christian virtue. He said, in effect, the rules of survival are different from the rules of goodness. This was the true core of the fear. He did not invent manipulation. He did not invent cruelty. He did not invent political deception. All of that had existed since the first human being competed with another for power. What Machiavelli did was give it language. He made it visible. He made it nameable. And once power's hidden grammar was named in print, it could never be fully unspoken. Kings hated it because it exposed how they actually operated. The church hated it because it treated politics as independent from divine authority. Common people feared it because it confirmed their darkest suspicions about how leaders really think. And scholars were fascinated by it because it was the first time anyone had written about governance as a science of consequences rather than a theater of virtue. Part 3. The infamous ideas. What the book actually says. Now let's go through the specific ideas that made The Prince so explosive and include the premium level details that most popular summaries miss entirely. First, is it better to be loved or feared? This is the most quoted idea from the book, and it is also the most misunderstood. Machiavelli begins this discussion by saying the ideal is to be both loved and feared. But he immediately acknowledges that this is difficult to maintain simultaneously. So if you are forced to choose, which do you pick? His answer: it is safer to be feared than loved. His reasoning is deeply cynical about human nature. He argues that human beings are, in general, ungrateful, fickle, deceptive, cowardly in danger, and eager for gain. As long as you are benefiting them, they are devoted. But when you need them, when danger is close, they will abandon you. Love is voluntary, and voluntary loyalty is fragile. Fear, on the other hand, is maintained by the prince's own power, not by the goodwill of others. That analysis alone was considered scandalous. It reads like a cold-blooded confession about how power really works. But here is the premium detail that most people stop before reaching. Machiavelli immediately adds a crucial second half. The prince must, at all costs, avoid being hated. He makes a hard distinction between fear and hatred. Fear, when properly maintained, generates obedience and stability. Hatred, especially when directed personally at the prince, generates conspiracy, assassination, and revolution. So the actual target is a very precise psychological state, controlled dread without personal resentment. The population should feel that the prince is too powerful to challenge, but not feel that they are being personally targeted or humiliated without reason. This is not casual brutality. It is a calculated theory of authority management, and the precision of it is what makes it so unsettling. He is not describing a monster. He is describing a strategy, one that can be learned, applied, and replicated. Second, the fox and the lion. Another of the book's most famous metaphors. Machiavelli says a ruler must know how to use both the nature of the beast and the nature of man. And among beasts, he must choose the fox and the lion. The lion is powerful. The lion can fight wolves, but the lion cannot detect traps. The fox is clever. The fox can detect traps, but the fox cannot fight wolves. A ruler needs both. He must be strong enough to confront direct challenges and clever enough to see danger approaching before it arrives. Force without intelligence walks into ambushes. Intelligence without force gets eaten. But the even deeper point connects to appearances. Machiavelli argues that the fox must be a master of concealment. A prince does not always need to be faithful, merciful, humane, upright, and religious. He needs to appear to be all of these things. That sentence, written in 1513, is perhaps the most modern idea in the entire book. Long before television, long before press conferences, long before social media, before photo shoots and carefully crafted speeches and political consultants, Machiavelli already understood that politics is partly theater, that public perception can be manufactured, that leaders are often judged not by what they are, but by what they are seen to be. He understood image management before the concept had a name. Third, cruelty, used well or used badly. This is the darkest and most uncomfortable section of the book, and it is also the one most casual readers either skip or mischaracterize. Machiavelli does not celebrate cruelty as a personal virtue. He makes a cold, precise distinction between what he calls cruelty well used and cruelty badly used. Cruelty badly used is random, ongoing, escalating, unpredictable. It generates terror without purpose. It generates the hatred he warned against. It destabilizes the state and eventually destroys the ruler himself. Cruelty well used, and this phrase is genuinely chilling, is deployed swiftly, decisively, completely, and early. It is used once, in concentrated form, to establish control, and then it stops. Machiavelli cites the example of Cesare Borgia, who appointed a brutal governor named Ramiro d'Orco to pacify a difficult region. The man was harsh, effective, and despised. Once the region was under control, Borgia had Ramiro publicly executed, cut in half, and left in the town square. The people, Machiavelli observes approvingly, were simultaneously satisfied and horrified. The mechanism was cold genius. Use the brutal agent to create order, then sacrifice the agent to reclaim public sympathy. The cruelty was real. The cleanup was theatrical. Both were strategic. This is the logic that made generations of readers put the book down with shaking hands. It does not describe evil for evil's sake. It describes evil made rational, structured, purposeful, and timed. And that is far more frightening than simple cruelty. Simple cruelty is unstable. Calculated cruelty endures. Part 4. The Hidden History. How the Fear Was Amplified. The text alone was dangerous enough. But what really turned the prince into a cultural nightmare was how institutions and public imagination responded to it. The Catholic Church's ban. In 1559, Pope Paul IV placed The Prince and all of Machiavelli's works on the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the official list of books Catholic readers were forbidden from reading. This was the same list that included works by Protestant reformers and banned scientific texts. The condemnation had an immediate and paradoxical effect. The moment the Church declared a book forbidden, everyone wanted to read it. The ban gave the prince an irresistible aura of dangerous hidden knowledge. People assumed it contained secrets of power so potent that the Vatican itself was afraid of them. The ban did not suppress the book. It immortalized it. Old Nick, the devil's nickname. In Elizabethan England, something remarkable happened to Machiavelli's reputation. His first name, Niccolò, was popularly linked to Old Nick, a common English nickname for the devil. He became a theatrical villain. Playwright Christopher Marlowe used him as an actual character in the prologue to The Jew of Malta, where Machiavelli strides onto the stage and cheerfully announces, "I count religion but a childish toy, and hold, there is no sin but ignorance." That is not what Machiavelli wrote. It is not even close to his actual argument. But it did not matter. Stage after stage, playwright after playwright, villain after villain modeled themselves on the theatrical Machiavel, the scheming, amoral manipulator who uses men like chess pieces and feels nothing. For centuries, this caricature was Machiavelli in popular imagination. The actual book was less well known than the monster his name had become, a manual for the worst rulers in history. And then came the real-world validation of every fear. Napoleon Bonaparte carried a personal annotated copy of The Prince and wrote extensive marginal notes throughout. He considered it essential reading for any statesman who wanted to understand the mechanics of political power. Benito Mussolini, the Italian fascist dictator, wrote his doctoral thesis on Machiavelli and frequently cited The Prince as intellectual justification for his authoritarian methods. He treated it as confirmation that strong, ruthless leadership was historically inevitable and philosophically defensible. Joseph Stalin was a documented admirer. He absorbed the book's logic of calculated brutality, loyalty tests, and preemptive elimination of threats. Historians have noted that Stalin's purges followed a pattern that maps disturbingly well onto Machiavellian logic, removing allies before they became rivals, using controlled terror to maintain obedience, and eliminating the very people who helped him rise to power. Three of history's most consequential authoritarian figures, across 3 different countries and 3 different political systems, all found in The Prince a mirror for their methods. That is perhaps the most terrifying testimony the book has ever received. Part 5. The Radical Shift: How History Changed Its Mind. Here is where the story becomes genuinely fascinating, because the world's interpretation of The Prince has not stayed still. It has moved dramatically across 5 centuries, and each phase tells us something important. Phase 1. The Devil's Counselor, 16th to 18th century. In this period, Machiavelli was almost universally seen as a satanic figure. His work was treated as a corruption of Christian political thought and a manual for sinful behavior. Frederick the Great of Prussia, before he became king, even wrote a book called Anti-Machiavel, refuting the Prince argument by argument and defending the idea that rulers must be moral to rule legitimately. He later became king and reportedly governed in ways that suggested he had reread The Prince more sympathetically. Power has a way of clarifying Machiavellian logic. Phase 2. The Realist, 19th century. By the 1800s, something had shifted. Philosophers and political thinkers began to reassess. Francis Bacon praised Machiavelli for abandoning utopian fantasies and engaging with how people actually behave. The emerging field of political science found in The Prince the first rigorous attempt to study governance empirically rather than morally. Most strikingly, Karl Marx, who was not known for praising Renaissance Florentine civil servants, called Machiavelli a true genius for exposing the class interests and power dynamics hidden beneath the language of religious virtue and divine authority. Marx read The Prince as a work that ripped off the ideological mask from Renaissance governance and showed the raw economic and political mechanisms underneath. Phase 3. The Irony Theory, Modern Academia. This is the most recent and perhaps the most intellectually interesting interpretation, and it is one of those premium-level insights that most casual discussions of the book never reach. A growing number of modern scholars argue that The Prince is not what it appears to be. They argue it is, at least partly, a sophisticated work of satire or irony, a piece of political theater designed not to teach tyrants how to rule, but to expose tyranny so clearly that educated readers would understand and resist it. The key evidence for this theory is Machiavelli's other major work, Discourses on Livy, which was written around the same time as The Prince and presents almost the opposite political philosophy. In the Discourses, Machiavelli argues passionately and consistently that republics, systems with popular participation, rule of law, and checks on individual power, are superior to principalities in almost every way. The Machiavelli of the Discourses is a genuine republican in the classical sense. Why would the same man who championed republics in one work write a handbook for absolute princes in another? Some scholars say the answer is that he did not. They argue The Prince was designed to reveal tyranny's methods so completely and so precisely that informed citizens could recognize it, name it, and ultimately resist it. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the 18th century political philosopher, hinted at something like this when he wrote that The Prince was really a book for the people, not for kings. By pretending to advise rulers, Machiavelli was actually showing the ruled exactly how they were being manipulated. Is this definitively true? Historians still debate it. The evidence is genuinely mixed. But the fact that careful readers across centuries have seriously entertained this interpretation tells us something important about the depth of the book. It operates simultaneously on multiple levels, as practical advice, as historical analysis, and possibly as a warning to the very people it pretends not to address. And then there is the final chapter. The prince ends with a passage called Exhortation to Liberate Italy from the Barbarians. It is one of the most emotionally raw sections in the entire book. After chapter of cold, clinical political analysis, cruelty, fear, appearances, animals, mercenaries, deception, Machiavelli suddenly breaks into something approaching poetry. He calls for a strong Italian leader to arise and drive out the foreign powers, France, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, that have turned the Italian peninsula into their battlefield. That final chapter feels like a man tearing off a mask. The calculating advisor disappears, and underneath is a patriot, someone who has watched his country humiliated by foreign armies and cannot bear it. Someone who wants order not for its own sake, but for the sake of Italian dignity and freedom. That final chapter is why scholars hesitate to call Machiavelli simply cynical. It reveals that behind the cold logic was a burning purpose. He did not love power for its own sake. He was desperate for a leader strong enough to use power well in service of a goal that genuinely mattered to him. Part 6. What different sources actually tell you. Now, a quick note on how to read this book from multiple angles, because depending on where you go to learn about the prince, you will get a very different picture. Wikipedia gives you the structural facts, biography, publication history, chapter summaries, and a neutral mapping of major political theories. It is reliable for dates and basic frameworks, but it rarely captures the emotional texture or the real historical stakes. Reddit treats the prince as a living conversation. You will find modern comparisons to Game of Thrones. Popular threads debate whether fear or love works better in corporate management. You will see arguments about whether Elon Musk or Vladimir Putin or various historical leaders fit the Machiavellian template. The quality varies wildly, but occasionally you will find a thread with genuinely brilliant comparative analysis. Interviews and documentaries, including BBC productions that have specifically explored Machiavelli, tend to emphasize the psychological dimension. Academic experts in these formats often make the comparison to Galileo. Just as Galileo described the real rules of physics rather than the convenient theological account, Machiavelli described the real rules of political power rather than the comfortable moral account. He was punished for it in both reputation and legacy. Long-form articles in publications like The Atlantic, History Today, and Foreign Affairs engage with the historical context more seriously. They emphasize that Italy in 1513 was a war-torn political disaster zone. French, Spanish, and Holy Roman armies had been marching through and occupying Italian cities for decades. Machiavelli was writing from within that crisis, not as an abstract theorist, but as someone who had watched his homeland get carved up by foreign powers and desperately wanted to understand what kind of leader could stop it. The original book itself is perhaps the biggest surprise for first-time readers. The Prince is short, remarkably short. It reads not like a dense philosophical treatise, but like a cold, efficient business memo. The prose is direct, the examples are concrete, the analysis is spare. There is almost no decorative language. And then the final chapter arrives, and suddenly the tone shifts completely. And you realize the whole text has been building toward this one desperate, emotional appeal. Part 7. The ultimate conclusion. The real reason for the fear. So why was the prince feared for 500 years? Not because it invented evil, not because it gave rulers new weapons they never had before, not because Machiavelli himself was a uniquely wicked man. It was feared because it named the thing that power had always depended on remaining unnamed. Every system of political authority throughout history has rested on some version of a justifying myth. Kings rule by divine right. Emperors rule by cosmic mandate. Democratic leaders rule by the will of the people. Religious authorities rule by divine revelation. The justifying myth makes the authority feel legitimate, natural, inevitable, something beyond mere human calculation. The prince stripped that away. It looked at political power and said, "Here is what is actually happening. Here are the real tools. Here is what actually determines whether a ruler survives. And none of it is divine. None of it is inevitable. It is all human strategy, human psychology, human fear, and human perception." That is what made kings furious. It suggested they were not chosen by God, but rather successful strategists who had read the political situation better than their competitors. That is what made the church furious. It suggested that political order did not flow from divine grace, but from the management of human fear and desire. That is what made ordinary people afraid. It confirmed their deepest suspicion, that those in power play by a completely different set of rules. Rules they have never been told about. Rules designed to maintain the gap between the powerful and the powerless. And that is what made the book immortal. Because that confirmation, that the powerful operate by different, colder, more calculated logic, remains as relevant in 2026 as it was in 1513. Look at modern political communication, the management of public image, the construction of narratives that make leaders look inevitable or righteous, the strategic deployment of fear about external enemies, the careful distinction between fear and hatred in crowd psychology, the use of trusted allies as temporary instruments who can be discarded when they become inconvenient, the presentation of calculated decisions as natural, moral, and inevitable. Machiavelli would recognize every single one of these techniques, not because he invented them, he did not, but because he was the first to write them down clearly enough that they could be studied, taught, and systematically applied. And here is the final thought that should stay with you. The prince does not teach you how to be Machiavellian. What it actually does is make you literate in the language of power. It gives you a vocabulary for recognizing what is happening around you. In politics, in institutions, in organizations, in any situation where people compete for authority and control. Ignorance of this language does not protect you from it. It simply means that the people who have read the book operate in your world while you are still trying to understand the rules. For 500 years, the comfortable and the powerful have wanted this book feared, dismissed, or condemned, because a population that understands power is a population that is harder to manage. Maybe that is the most Machiavellian thing of all. The prince is not feared because it teaches evil. It is feared because it teaches awareness. And some people will always prefer that you remain unaware. That is the prince. 500 years of fear, misunderstanding, misuse, and radical reinterpretation, all from one short, cold, precise, desperate book written by a tortured man in exile who just wanted his job back. If this kind of deep dive is what you are looking for, subscribe to the Bookline, where we go further than the summary, deeper than the Wikipedia page, and into the real substance of the books that changed how humans think. And one question before you go: Machiavelli, devil, realist, satirist, or patriot? Drop your answer in the comments. The debate is still open after 500 years, and I genuinely want to know where you land.